Hi everyone, welcome to Terror at Twilight with Miss Cheryl. I'm reading from Roberta Simpson Brown, her story, Feed My Cats. Big One's claws raked across the basement door that led into Anna Eaton's kitchen. Meow, he roared. Anna stroked her other cats as she tore open the packaged cat food and filled the bowls that lined the kitchen wall. Then she hurriedly opened small cans of turkey, salmon, and chicken, topped the bowls with the cat's special treats. They began to gobble the food at once. Meow, Big One repeated, still scratching the door. The meowing and the scratching on the basement door reminded Anna that her favorite cat hadn't been fed yet. Big One didn't eat as often as the others, but his appetite was ferocious. Once he began to get hungry. Be patient, Big One, she called. I'll see that you get your favorite treat soon. Big One began to purr. Anna was glad he was happy. It wouldn't be wise to keep him waiting too long. Anna took especially good care of her cats. She lived alone, so she had plenty of time to spoil them. Anna knew that people talked about her, but she didn't care. She knew they said she cared more about her cats than she did people, and she spent more money on cat food than she spent on herself. She saw nothing wrong with that. Her greatest pleasure was to watch her cats eat, especially Big One. Anna didn't know where Big One had come from. He had appeared at her door one stormy night when she was very lonely. So she brought him in, fed him. Since that night, he had been her best and closest companion, and she had taken great satisfaction in providing him with a proper diet. She found out quite by accidentally that he preferred. It wasn't always easy to obtain the kind of food he wanted. Sometimes it required a great deal of planning and effort. She couldn't let him out to hunt his own food. He was much too rare. Somebody might take him away from her. She kept him locked in the basement so nobody would know he was there. Meow, screeched Big One impatiently, scratching the door again. All right, called Anna. I'll arrange you a treat right now. She hated to call on her neighbors and co-workers down at the office, especially since they had made unkind remarks to her in the past. She needed help with her cats in order to make arrangements for Big One, though, and she had no other choice. She phoned her neighbor Madeline Miller first. Madeline Miller was the only one who had ever complained about her cats getting out. That had only happened once when Anna had left the door ajar while she carried in groceries. 2 of the cats had slipped out and caught a bird. Madeline had made an awful row about it. She hit one of the cats with a rock, and Anna hadn't forgotten. Madeline answered after several rings. Madeline, Anna said, this is Anna Eaton. I hate to impose, but there's something I simply have to do, and I was wondering if you could be kind enough to feed my cats late this afternoon. Madeline hesitated. She didn't like cats, but she knew she hadn't been very nice to Anna the time her pets got loose. This would be a neighborly thing to do, and maybe it would make up for their difference in the past. Yes, said Madeline, I can do that for you. You're a dear friend to do it, said Anna. I'll have everything ready. The cats will be in the kitchen. Don't open the basement door. My steps are steep and dangerous. I'll leave the key under the mat on the porch. Bye. Anna rushed about preparing for what she had to do. As soon as she hung up, Madeline was filled with misgivings. She didn't like going into the empty house alone, but she had no choice now. Anna was counting on her to feed the cats. Late that afternoon, Madeline went to Anna's house just as she promised. She was hoping the key wouldn't be there so she would have an excuse not to go in, but it was under the mat. As Madeline stepped inside, the cats immediately emerged from dark corners to greet her. They rubbed against her legs, eager for their dinner. Anna had set the food out and had left written instructions. Madeline followed the instructions and opened the packages and cans, filled the bowls, and the cats rushed all over and began gulping down the food. Madeline felt good about doing Anna a favor. She started to leave, but a sound from behind the basement door stopped her in her tracks. Meow, Big One's voice boomed. I thought she left all her cats in the kitchen, Madeline said aloud. Meow. She heard again. This time the meow was followed by frantic scratching on the door. Poor thing, thought Madeline. It smells the food and can't get to it. I'll bet Anna didn't know it was down there when she closed the door. Meow, meow, said Big One louder than ever. Okay, I'll let you out, said Madeline. Anna told me not to open the basement door, but I know she'd want me to feed you. The door was unlocked, so she pulled it open. She was face to face with the biggest cat she'd ever seen. Madeline had only a second to stare at Big One. His dark, shadowy form leaped at her. She saw blazing green eyes and fiery red claws as sharp teeth tore into her flesh. Yow! Screeched Big One, pouncing and pulling his prey down the basement steps to where Anna was waiting. Anna stood watching among the shadows in the far corner of the basement with great pleasure as Big One finished his treat. She had done what she had to do. She had bags and mop, a bucket of water in case she needed to clean up after Big One was through. They always do what they're told not to, chuckled Anna. I warned her not to open the basement door. Big One swallowed his last bite, licked his paws, and meowed at Anna for more. You can't still be hungry, she said. He licked his paws and again stared at her. Well, okay, said Anna, but just one more this week. You mustn't be greedy. Let's see now. Whom shall I call? She ran through a mental list of names and then remembered Edith Gorman down at the office. Edith would be perfect. Anna hadn't forgotten how she embarrassed her yesterday. When Edith answered the phone, Anna spoke to her friendliest voice. Edith, she says, this is Anna Eaton. I hate to bother you at home, but there's something I simply have to do, and I was wondering if you could stop by at your way to work in the morning and feed my cats. Edith was a little surprised that Anna was asking her for a favor. Just yesterday they had words over an office report that Anna failed to complete properly, and she had said some unkind things to her. She even called her stupid. She was sorry now that she had been so hard on her. This would be a good way to make it up to her. Funny. Yes, said Edith. I can feed the cats. You're a dear to do it, said Anna. I'll have everything ready. The cats will be in the kitchen. Don't open the basement door. My steps are steep and dangerous. I'll leave the key under the mat on the porch. Bye. Anna hung up the phone and hummed as she cleaned the kitchen. She gathered her bags, her mop, and her bucket and took them to the corner of the basement. As evening shadows gathered, she turned out the upstairs lights, closed the basement door, and took her place beside Big One in the darkness. She smiled, and Big One purred softly as she stroked him. Morning will come very soon. The end. Well, thank you for sharing my stories with me. I hope you enjoyed them. Have a great evening. Bye.
Happy Halloween, and thanks for joining us for our final Terror at Twilight. Tonight's story is going to come from Tiny Nightmares and is going to be Doggy Dog World by Hilary Lichter. I know this couple, in a casual way, a neighborly way. They went to the adoption place to adopt a cute friend, something soft and sweet, something to love. We want something to love, they said, and I said, besides each other? They said, in addition to. We want something waiting for us by the door, a fan, a witness. This is our wish. By my front door, I have an antique mirror, so I can be my own fan, my own witness. The first puppy didn't work out. The first puppy was sick and needed people with experience. This couple had a lot of experience, but not the right kind. They cried about the first puppy. I made them an interesting blend of tea and stroked their hair until they felt better. The second puppy was as tiny as you can imagine. Whatever you're imagining is correct. perpetually bouncing like it could blow away any second, just float up in the air like a cute flying cartoon sort of creature. She was a dear little friend, and they loved each other very much. They let her sleep in their bed and eat out of their bowls and make messes as long as the messes were on the tile, not the carpet. One thing, this couple was not super perceptive. They were not the kind of people who noticed other people. There was the time I cut my hair and they did not see the hairs were cut. Or the time I was in a car accident and walked on crutches for a week. After a month, the couple said, "Hey, what's with the crutches?" There was the time I was in love with this couple, both as a couple and as individuals. Loved them in a visible way, an embarrassing way for years. Then the feelings expired, and I felt relaxed, easy. It is sometimes good to go unnoticed. My point is, when the puppy turned into a human baby, it took them a while to catch on. First, the sounds coming from her puppy mouth were baby sounds. Then the paws on her puppy legs were baby paws, which I guess are just called feet. Maybe it was hours before the couple noticed. Maybe it was a whole afternoon. She had maybe already been a baby for a few days before the couple said, "Oh my God." Everyone around town was talking. The first thing I personally do in situations like these is to make myself mindful of precedent. Consider the frog who turns into the prince, the beast who turns into the prince, and consider all of those princes sprung from the bodies of beasts. Now, consider the puppy who turns into a child. What sort of suburban spell could have put her in such a difficult spot? I volunteered as a babysitter and helped care for her, this very special baby. She was not as bouncy as her former incarnation. She was not a creature who could fly away. In fact, she wouldn't. When describing her, the word that came to mind was responsible. I looked into her eyes and found a steadiness I could relate to. The couple converted their office into a nursery with an air of, "Okay, this is what we're doing now." They replaced the puppy toys with baby toys, the puppy bed with a baby crib. They replaced the dog park with the playground and the poop scoop with a closet full of diapers. They transitioned so naturally from puppy to baby that there was no trace of the puppy I once knew. Not at all. The puppy things were in garbage bags in the basement, tucked away in a far corner. This is the part of the story where the couple started calling themselves the family. I should start calling them that too, but I won't, because of what happened to the couple next. It was at the restaurant across town, the one that serves pieces of toast topped with fancy foods. The couple was on a date, and I was watching their child. The woman from the restaurant who called on the phone said it happened during the third course of the meal, the dessert toast. The couple started bickering, but their bickers turned to barks. Their faces went furry and small. They tried to pick up their slabs of bread, but they had dog paws instead of human paws, which I guess are just called hands. The couple was a couple of hounds, noses sniffing plates of expensive carbohydrates. I strapped the baby to my chest and then fetched them from their date. I brought some of the old puppy leashes and leashed them up, walked them home. I brought the rest of the puppy things up from the basement and over to my house. I stroked their fur and made them an interesting blend of dry foods to eat. Since they had missed their dinner, I set 2 doggy beds near the front door under my antique mirror. I looked at myself when I leave for work, adjusting my collar, adjusting my skirt, adjust the stroller, and adjust the baby tucked in the stroller. I look at my dogs. I look at my family. All together. I adjust my face, make sure it looks normal. For I, too, have sprung from unexpected things. The end. Well,
Hi everyone, welcome to Terrors at Twilight with Miss Cheryl. Tonight's reading is The Closet by Roberta Simpson Brown. Brian Alvey hated bedtime. When his mother tucked him in at night, Brian would beg for her to push the closet door all the way shut. She would try, but she never quite got it closed. "The door is warped, honey," she explained. "We'll have it repaired as soon as we can." This promise never did satisfy Brian, but all the repairs they were already doing on this house, Brian knew it would be a long time before they got around to his closet door. If they didn't fix it soon, it would be too late. Something very dangerous was in that closet. He tried to convince his mother, but she didn't understand. Just because she couldn't see it didn't mean it wasn't there. "There's nothing in that closet but your clothes and toys," she told him over and over. Brian knew better. He had known since the first night he slept in his new room. First, he heard the floorboards creaking inside the closet. He'd been too scared to look that night, but the next day he had stepped inside and tried to make them creak. They didn't make a sound for him, so whatever was in the closet must have been bigger than he was. The next night, along with the creaking, Brian heard something crawling around on the floor. He didn't look, but he could feel several eyes watching him through the slightly open door. He knew that any time they wanted to, they could creep out and get him. The remodeling was coming along fairly well, but Brian's closet was far down on the list of repairs. Each night Brian would lie in bed and listen to the creaking and crawling around in his closet. He began to think of them as creepy crawlies. He would remember his old room in the other house where they lived, and he wished he could live there again. He knew it was impossible, though. His father's new job was in town. "So, do you think he ever likes this place?" Miss Alvey asked her husband one evening. "Sure," he told her. "He just needs a little time to adjust." Brian tried to explain it wasn't the place that he didn't like, it was the creepy crawlies. He never only complained about the occupants of the closet now, he had begun to see them in his dreams, and every night he woke up screaming. "Tell us about the dreams," his mother urged, but Brian couldn't remember the details clearly. "They come through tunnels and they want out," he said. "They look like shadows at first, but then they turn into horrible-looking people and start to crawl towards me." His parents had never seen Brian so upset. Nothing they said convinced him that he was safe, so fixing the closet door became a top priority in the Alvey household. Brian felt a little better when the doors were repaired and he could lock it. He could still hear the creepy crawlies, but now they couldn't stare at him through the open door. What bothered him most now was no one believed the creepy crawlies really existed. The door was holding them back for the present, but he worried that they might find a way to get out. He wished that somebody could see them or at least find some evidence that they were there. Mrs. Alvey was the first one to think that there might be some basis for her son's fears. One day, as she was collecting dirty clothes from Brian's closet for the weekly wash, she noticed something on the floor by the back wall. She looked closer and saw that it was black dirt. It wasn't like the dirt in the yard. Where had it come from? Puzzled, she cleaned it up. She wondered if something really was getting through the wall somehow and scaring Brian. She couldn't see any holes, but the dirt had to have come from somewhere. She mentioned the incident to Mr. Alvey, but he had no explanation either. The next afternoon, Mrs. Alvey was shopping for groceries when she met two of her neighbors. They stopped to chat and asked if she was having any problems settling in. During the conversation, Mrs. Alvey casually mentioned that something seemed to be getting into Brian's closet. She asked if they ever heard any problems with animals getting inside of their houses. "No," they told her. "Nothing has ever gotten in." Mrs. Alvey's story had piqued their curiosity, and they encouraged her to elaborate. Without thinking about it, she told them all about Brian's problem with the creepy crawlies. They were sympathetic, but never could offer much help. One did remember that an old coal mine used to provide jobs for men in the area a long time ago. The mine was closed years ago, she said. Several men were trapped and died when there was an explosion in one of the tunnels. Instead of trying to reopen, the company sold their land for a housing development. "I don't think your house is close to the mine, but it might be possible that rats got in the mine shafts and tunneled through." Mrs. Alvey shuddered at such a repulsive idea. She quickly assured them there was no rats in her house. She thanked the ladies and returned home, wishing she never brought up the subject. That night she listened by the closet door after she tucked Brian in. She couldn't be sure, but she thought she heard a soft scraping on the floor. She waited a minute, but she heard nothing else. When she caught up with her work, she might call an exterminator to come out and take a look. Brian hadn't mentioned the sounds in the closet for days, and the dreams weren't coming as often. Just as Mrs. Alvey began to think the ordeal might be over, trouble came from an unexpected source. Brian came home from the first day of school crying and saying he was never going back. He was so furious with his mother, he ran to his room and locked the door. He wouldn't come out until his father came home. They finally persuaded him to tell them what had happened. Word had spread about the Alveys' closets as a result of the grocery store discussion. All the kids at school had heard about Brian's problem. They showed no mercy with their teasing. "I'm so sorry, Brian. I didn't think the other children would find out," explained Mrs. Alvey. "I was just trying to get some information." "You shouldn't have told," sobbed Brian. "They'll probably forget all about it by tomorrow," said Mrs. Alvey. "Just don't let them see that it bothers you." They didn't forget. They made fun of him all the next day. "What's in your closet, Brian?" they jeered. "Are they killer teddy bears or stinky old rats?" Some of them even got down and crawled around on their stomachs. "Is this the way the creepy crawlies do it?" they giggled. Now Brian began to hate the days as much as the nights, began to lose sleep and weight. The sneering of the kids at school and the scraping of the creepy crawlies at home tormented him constantly. Mrs. Alvey didn't see any more black dirt, but she now smelled a damp, musty odor in the closet when she gathered Brian's clothes for the wash. One night, when she brought in the clean clothes to hang in the closet, she was overwhelmed by an urge to run. She actually retreated from the door. She felt foolish for being so scared. She grabbed the closet door and yanked it open. Maybe it was just her eyes, but it looked to her like several shadowy forms vanished through the wall. Something had to be getting inside. She didn't care how expensive exterminators were. She was going to find out what was going on. She ran straight to the phone and dialed the No Pest Company. She asked for someone right away, but the only time they had available was on Monday. She set up the appointment, but she worried that she had waited too long. Whatever was in the closet was getting stronger. On Saturday morning, Mr. and Mrs. Alvey tried to persuade Brian to go shopping with them. He didn't like going out much anymore because he was afraid of running into the kids from school. He decided to stay home and watch TV. His parents had just left when Brian heard the doorbell ring. He looked out, but he didn't see anyone. He opened the door and stepped outside. From round the corner dashed the daily tormentors from the school, who pushed him inside before he could close the door. "You can't come in here," said Brian. "I'll call my dad." "We're already in," they laughed. We saw your folks leave, so we came to see the creepy crawlies." They crossed the living room and strolled down the hall, opening the doors until they found Brian's room. "Wait," called Brian. "Don't go in there." The boys only laughed. They were already going through the door. Brian followed, torn by the urge to throw them out and by the need for them to hear the creepy crawlies and know that he was telling the truth. Brian walked to the closet door. He could hear something moving inside. "Listen," he said. "They're in there now." The boys gathered around Brian, and before he realized what was happening, they grabbed him and pushed him into the closet. He heard the key turn in the lock, and he heard them rolling around on the floor, laughing and howling. Then something very, very cold began pulling at Brian from the closet wall. Brian screamed and kicked and pounded, but he couldn't open the door. None of the kids would let him out. The more he begged, the harder they laughed. Then the room got cold, and the sounds in the closet ceased. The kids stopped laughing. "Maybe he fainted," someone said. "We'd better let him out." They unlocked the door, expecting to see a very frightened boy. Instead, they saw only clothes and toys and some specks of black dirt on the wall. Brian was gone. They stood staring at the spot where they had seen him just minutes ago. It seemed like such a good joke then, but nobody was laughing now. "He's hiding," said one of the boys. "There must be a hidden door in the wall or on the floor." They looked, but they didn't find one. They called his name, but they got no answer. There was not at all what they had planned. They were still searching for him when his parents came home. Mr. Alvey knew what they had done before they told him. He was sure they had meant no harm, but he was completely baffled about Brian's disappearance. He thought at first that the boys were right about Brian's hiding. He couldn't imagine where he could be. After they had completely searched the house without a trace of Brian, Mr. Alvey had to admit that something was seriously wrong. Mrs. Alvey and the boys looked outside when Mr. Alvey phoned the police. The police responded quickly, but their investigation turned up nothing. They questioned the boys and sent them home. After they had gone, Mrs. Alvey told the officers the story about the closet. She repeated the conversation she had had with the two women about the old mine. "Do you think is there any connection between the old mine and Brian's disappearance?" she asked. "No," said the first officer. "There's nothing down in that mine but a bunch of dead men." "The shafts and the tunnels wouldn't reach this far," said the second policeman, "unless those dead men have been digging a long time. Try not to worry. We'll find the boy." The hours dragged by with no news of Brian, and the Alveys lost all sense of time while they waited. Mrs. Alvey realized it was Monday when the exterminator from No Pests came. She hadn't thought to cancel the appointment. "I don't need you now," she thought bitterly. "Since you're here, you might as well have a look around," said Mr. Alvey. The exterminator checked the house inside and out, but there was no evidence of anything. Before leaving, he decided to crawl under the floor to be sure he hadn't missed anything. There were no signs of any animals or any breaks in the ground. All he saw was a lump of coal and a rusty old miner's hat with a burned-out light on top. He kicked them out of the way. They were not worth mentioning, and they were the only things he found beneath the closet. The end. Thank you for enjoying the story. I hope you've found them all interesting. Have a good evening. Bye.
Tonight's final story for Terror at Twilight is going to come from Tiny Nightmares and will be Load by a Jack Jump. Adrian woke feeling rested, a surprise after a night camping by herself. She had survived unharmed, with nothing between her and the wilderness but a thin sheet of nylon. She committed herself to making it work. She had lost so much since breaking up with Sam and refused to add camping to the list of casualties. The couple they camped with before were hesitant to commit to a 3-person weekend getaway with her. Even the ones who sided more with her seemed to be perennially booked. She asked individual friends to come along, but they all had reasons to say no. Jacqueline insisted she hated roughing it, despite Adrian's attempts to convince her. She had all the gear to make it luxurious: a huge tent, air mattresses, a propane stove to make coffee in the morning, easy, and a veritable tank of bourbon. Para had read a book that didn't end well about women camping alone. Together, Mal kept committing and then backing out. Adrian finally broke down and decided to go solo. She'd already booked her site at Summit Lake. She reviewed her Tupperware tote of supplies and added a roll of paper towels and a new bottle of bug spray. She went to the grocery store the day before, chopped vegetables and kneaded hamburger patties, and packed everything together in the cooler. To others, she wanted to appear strong, hiding any clues of vulnerability to encourage them to accompany her. But she was incensed that she did have the nerves about camping alone. How dare she be deprived of this? How dare she be kept from a night closer to nature? Hearing all those sounds and smelling those smells and feeling just slightly more like an animal who existed in a real live world, it rejuvenated her. It powered her back up for work and other mundanities required of her. Only one thing sparked the fear: men. Bears or raccoons or spiders did not intimidate her. In fact, Adrian often thought she'd be happiest if her death came in the form of an animal attack. A survival of the fittest that she couldn't disagree with. She could not stand, however, the idea of a man harming her in the woods. She took issue with the way it would so inaccurately reflect the balance of power. The level of need and security of the parties involved. She had given so much to Sam just to get him to go, just to be sure he would be okay without her, and still, she She felt people's pity when she shared the news of the breakup, as though she were the victim, when, in fact, she had been in charge. He was the one who untagged her from all his photos on social media and able to deal with the painful memories. He was the one who unfriended her after she asked him to leave. She flared at the thought. When she saw the pair of hiking boots Sam had left behind in the basement, her first thought was to throw them away. Her second thought was to call him and tell him she'd left them on the front porch for him to pick up, eliminating any need for interaction. But that gave her an idea. She thought of how after her grandfather died, her grandmother left all the bills in his name, so that if people looked at her mail, they wouldn't know she lived alone. If Adrian took the boots with her and placed them outside the tent, anyone passing by would have seen a man slept inside. If a human predator was looking for innocent prey, they'd think twice. The night before, she'd set up her tent first and built her fire second. She loved getting the fire going, had always made it her task, even when Sam pretended mastery in the company of friends. She poured herself a bourbon in a tin cup, set out her food on the grate, and tended it with care. The sun had set by the time the meat had cooked through. She added logs to the heap and set marshmallows on fire. She took a selfie lit by the flames. She videoed the ooze of a s'more. She took a photo of the sky, disappointed at the dimness of the stars as they appeared on her phone's screen. She had no service out here, but she would show off her solo camping skills on Sunday when she returned to civilization. Her site was near their latrine, and she watched as other campers made their final trips before settling in for the night. By the pairs of people and conversations overheard, she determined the campground to be occupied by couples and families. She wondered if she was being paranoid, but in the end, when the fire had withered, she'd set the boots outside the tent and zipped herself in. She read a magazine by lantern light on her air mattress with a final finger of liquor and popped a ZzzQuil and fell asleep. In the morning, she made coffee. She loved the dewy chill, how her nose felt both runny and clear. She tugged her hat down over her ears and cradled her mug close as she watched people pass on their morning trips to the latrine. A man waved at her, and Adrian failed to decipher something in his expression. His smile held some sort of secret. She waited for him to walk past her, but she didn't see him again. Maybe he'd gone out for a hike, or he'd walked back to his site a different way. She thought about what she wanted to do that day, but she couldn't get the man's smile out of her head. She booked the site for 2 nights, but she packed the tent up. She threw the tub of supplies and the cooler back into the car. She decided to leave the boots right where they were. Sam would buy a new pair, and Adrian wouldn't need them again. Something had changed, and despite the peaceful night, she knew she wouldn't be camping alone again. She made the 2-hour drive crying, furious with herself. At home, she transferred everything from the cooler to the fridge. She threw her bedding in the wash with shaking hands. She poured herself a drink to calm herself down and took out her phone to post the photos with a caption that painted the overnight in the positive light she counted on. She opened her photos and understood. She saw the selfie in front of the fire and the video of the s'more. She remembered trying to capture the stars, but then she saw 3 more photos. She hadn't taken them herself. The boots outside the tent in the dark, her sleeping body inside, and then a close-up, the bottom half of a man's face, grinning. The end. Hopefully when you go out tonight, you'll be a bit more aware of your own surroundings and not be caught by creepy men in the dark. Happy Halloween. Thanks for watching. Bye.